Okay, in our last exciting episode, we had walked through the content of the journal HTML file. We talked about the various blocks on the page, the various boxes, and now we want to see how the browser is going to display this. Now we've taken the trouble to go in and comment out the link to the style sheet. So this browser is only going to show what the HTML looks like using whatever internal style sheet it has built in as a default. So let's take a look at this file. I'm going to drag my azjournal a2.html file and drop it into Firefox. Now you can see that there's a bunch of stuff here. There's some images, image placeholders, there's some sort of header, there's text. Pretty much corresponds directly to what we had. We had a header with a title, we had a journal entry and what we called an article with an article header and an article content. Now the nice thing about Firefox, and we're using a version of Firefox of 15, Firefox 15. This is on Windows 7. We're going to use something called the Web Developer menu. There's a bunch of interesting things in the Web Developer menu. In particular, we're going to use the Inspect tool. Now I know that this browser is very small font in this video. Please bring up your file and look at it using your own machine. When we're in the Inspect view, you hover the mouse pointer over various parts of the page and you can see that it automatically shows you in the code what is causing that part of the page to be rendered. So for here example, this is a div. Look up in the div.article notates that this is a div named article. The class of this div is article. Down here there's another div called article. So this is what the browser is displaying for our code. It works both ways. I can click on this, and if you look in the lower pane, when I click on something in the rendered page, it shows me the code that created that. So if I click here, I click here. I can also click on the code and it will show me up in the rendering where that is actually being displayed. So as I said earlier, it's a series of boxes, and you can now see these boxes as the browser sees them by using the Web Developer Inspect command. Here are the various boxes. Now you notice each one of the boxes stretches all the way across the page. That article content div stretches all the way across the page. That paragraph stretches all the way across the page. There's the ordered list we saw. Here's the image. The image has a height and a width, as you recall. It has a height of 250 and a width of 250. So that doesn't stretch across the page. We want to add style to this. So we're going to go back in and we're going to enable the style sheet. And we're going to spend some time taking a look at the style sheet to see how that works. So let's let this guy go back down. Let's open up the HTML file and remove the comments from that link line of code. And I'm going to save the file. Let's go back to the browser and reload. Now you can see that the browser is displaying styled divs. Let's use the inspector, Web Developer Inspect, to see how this is working. So up here is this is the whole container. This is the body, container, various parts of the header. Here's the journal article heading. Here's the article content. Here are those validation badges we saw earlier. So now the browser has specific instructions on how to display each one of these boxes on the page. And what are those instructions? Those are the styles. So let's look at this validation badge division. I clicked on it, and in the right-hand side of the Inspect tool, you can now see the rules. There are some rules that come from the browser itself. And then there are some rules that come from our .css file, azjournala2.css. Namely, the validation div .validation badge is supposed to float to the right. That means it floats over to the right-hand side of the container. Also, we notice that we're inheriting some of the rules from the body. Namely, that the font's a little bit bigger than an M, and we want it to be Helvetica of some sort. Let's go look at this file and work through it piece by piece. So I'm going to blow this guy up, and I want to do these things side by side. So I'm going to open up the Style Sheets folder, double click on the journal, and now I can swap back and forth from the HTML to the cascading style sheet. But I want to be a little fancier than that. So I'm going to make one of the editors half the size, and I'm going to drag that tab out into its own editor. Now we can see on the left-hand side, let's throw away the sidebar. On the left-hand side is the HTML. On the right-hand side is the cascading style sheet. A cascading style sheet contains a bunch of rules that says for each of these elements, this is how I want you to display them. One of the references in your materials is for the W3 Schools page on CSS syntax. Let's take a closer look at that. Oh, can get rid of that. Each CSS rule has two main parts, a selector and one or more declarations. Here's the selector. It's normally an HTML element, but it can also be all sorts of different things. We'll get deeper into CSS syntax as we go through the course. Inside the declaration are a number of property and value pairs. Here's the property called color, and we want the value to be blue. Here's the property called font size. We want the value to be 12 pixels. There's a semicolon between each declaration. You need to make sure that we keep that semicolon. So here's a declaration. We want the body to have a font size of slightly bigger than an M. We want to use a font family, and we want to have a background color that is a very small gray. It's a dark gray. Then, if you recall, the first div in our HTML is called a container. Its class is container. And we want that container to be 900 pixels wide. And we want the margins on the left and right to automatically stretch and shrink depending on the page. We want the background color of the container to be a brighter shade of gray. Let's take a look at that. So we'll open up the browser and let's see, using Tools, Web Developer, Inspect. Here's the container. We click on it and we see that there are the rules. The container is 900 pixels, the margin is left is auto, margin right is auto, and the background color is gray. The browser is showing us the color in a slightly different format. You'll learn about color formats as you read through the class's materials. Now, how do we control this? It's pretty easy. If you want to change the color of something, or you want to change its size, or any of that sort of stuff, you simply change these properties. And then the rule has container here, the class container. It is applied to the division here, or the paragraph, or whatever. Now there's a couple of other things we want to talk about in this early assignment, and that's the box model. Again, using the references from your material, there's an article on the W3 School site that shows you the box model. Everything is a box. The content is a box that has a height and a width. Every box has a border around it. Normally that border is invisible, but you can set it to any thickness and you can make it a color. The difference between the content and the border is called padding. If you want some white space inside the border, you increase the padding. The white space outside the border is called the margin. If you want some distance between this box and the boxes around it, you use the margin. So, for example, the heading of every article is 600 pixels wide. The left margin is 20 pixels, and we want 10 pixels of padding inside a 1 pixel solid black border. So what does that look like? Here's the article heading. We click on it. We can see the margin, the padding, and the border. So everybody has some margin over here, and the padding is what's inside. If you want to add white space or increase the padding inside one of these divisions, inside of one of these boxes, you would adjust the padding. If you want to increase the white space between one and the next, between this and this, for example, you would add margin to one of them. Typically, it's a good rule of thumb to add margin to only one of these two. So my particular habit is I add margin to the tops of things. So this, so the margin on the content is 0. The margin on the header looks like 20 pixels. In your assignment, you'll have a variety of changes that we want you to make both to the HTML and the CSS. So you'll need to look up the box model. You'll need to understand the difference between the various ways of specifying the dimensions of the padding, the margin, the height, and the width. To get you started, here's 2 shortcuts. In this rule, you'll notice that the padding is just 10 pixels. If you just see one number, that means that we want 10 pixels on the top, on the right, on the bottom, and on the left. Make this 10 pixel number apply to all four sides. If you see a specification or a value that has four numbers in it, in this case it's 0, 20 pixels, 0, and 20 pixels. That means we want 0 margin on the top, 20 pixels on the right, 0 margin on the bottom, 20 pixels on the left. Top, right, bottom, left. It's always clockwise from the top of the box. There's a third way of specifying the dimensions of the box, or the amount of margin, or the amount of padding, and I'll leave that for an exercise for you to look up on the W3 School site. The other aspect that we're going to ask you to do in the assignment is to make the colors a little more interesting. Now you'll notice that we have a dark gray for the body, a light gray for the container, a slightly different gray for the article heading, and a pure white for the article content. 4 colors. And you'll often see a web page having a color scheme, a set of coordinated colors. Currently, this page is all monotone, grayscale. The body is black. Okay, let's look at the body tag. The body is black. The container is gray, the header is gray, and the article itself is white, black on white. So if you're going to choose other colors, you want to make them coordinated. There's a lot to this, but I'm going to point you at a very, very cool website recommended for you that helps you come up with color schemes. This is called Color Scheme Designer, and we'll just quickly pick out some colors for a different set that might make it a little more interesting. We're going to use complementary colors. We're going to switch it to, I like gold and blue. So the dark areas, the body perhaps, will be this color. The container will be this color. The article heading will be this color. And we'll keep the article body as white. So let's capture this color list, clicking on the color list there, and let's transfer it to our CSS file. Rearranging my windows just a little bit, I'm going to go up to the body, and instead of this dark gray, I'm going to use 04. I'm going to use that color. And the container is going to be a slightly different color, and I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to go down to the article heading, which has to be very bright. And I'm going to use that light yellow. And I'm going to keep the article itself as white. So let's save this file, and let's go back to the browser, and we'll reload the browser. And then we have slightly different colors. In your assignment, feel free to come up with any color scheme you like. There are 4 colors you have to choose from. I would keep it simple, either a complementary color scheme or at most a triad color scheme. Don't go too wild, because if it makes me nauseous to look at your page, it's going to be awfully hard to grade. Okay, so for more details of what you have to do to your page, please see the assignment. Make sure you fix that bug in the HTML file that I gave you, and then you need to validate both the HTML and the CSS. There's an article on validating things in your materials. It can be daunting to validate a file. Hopefully, there's only a few bugs in this file. There ought to be some, because I wrote it. And besides, if it was perfect, what would you have to do? I'm just kidding. So that's it for now. I will see you in the discussion forums and in the email. Thank you very much for your attention.